Heroes of the City of Man, pages 191 to 197. Here we go. His own did not receive him, books 13 through 18. The second half of the epic is largely a series of recognition scenes. A recognition scene is one of several type scenes frequently used in literature. These frequently involve the reunion of people who have long been separated and include standard recurring elements. One of the parties expresses a wish for the other to appear, and lo and behold, there he is. Tokens or signs that prove one's identity are also conventional. In Aeschylus's Liberation Bearers, Orestes and Electra recognize each other by the similarity of their footprints, a scene mocked in Aristophanes' play The Frogs. Recognition of Odysseus does not come easily. Not only has he been gone for a long time, but he returns in disguise and gradually reveals himself to those who remained loyal. First, he reveals himself to Telemachus, and together the now mature young man and his father make plans to dispose of the suitors. Then he is revealed to his old nursemaid, Eurycleia. He reveals himself to a few loyal household servants. When the moment is right, he reveals himself in all his splendor and strength to the terrified suitors. He is reunited to Penelope, and finally to his mourning father, Laertes. Odysseus, who began the epic hidden on Calypso's island, achieves a progressive apocalypse. Wendell Berry has pointed out that Odysseus's journey from no man's land to home is a movement toward the center of order. The structure may be graphed as a series of diminishing circles centered on one of the posts of the marriage bed. Odysseus makes his way from the periphery toward that center. All around the structure verges on the sea, which is a wilderness ruled by the forces of nature and by the gods. In spite of the excellence of his ship and crew and his skill in navigation, a man is alien there. Only when he steps ashore does he enter a human world. From the shoreline of his island of Ithaca, Odysseus makes his way across a succession of boundaries, enclosed and enclosing. He comes to his island, to his own lands, to his town, to his household and house, to his bedroom, to his bed. By these, his homecoming becomes at the same time a restoration of order. Here we see that the man of twists and turns alone can navigate the treacherous voyage to the center, the place around which the world revolves. Only this kind of hero can establish a properly ordered society. At each stage, Odysseus must show himself by some token or sign. There are obvious reasons for this. He must have some proof beyond his own word that he is indeed the king of Ithaca. This is especially necessary since so many suitors have presented themselves as potential successors to Odysseus. How is one to know if this man is just a cleverly disguised suitor? Penelope is afraid that a god might be deceiving her by taking the form of her husband. More subtly, the need for signs fits with several of the larger themes of the epic. Odysseus is, as we have seen, the man of twists and turns, and other characters also use various kinds of ruses and deceptions. This kind of world makes people wary and suspicious, and absolute proof is needed if one is to win trust. This also relates to the themes of identity, name, and heroism that we have been examining. Book 13 opens with Odysseus's return to the real world. Scheria was only a midpoint in this return, a borderland between fantasy and reality, between waking and sleeping. Fittingly, the whole Phaeacian sojourn is framed by scenes of Odysseus sleeping. He falls asleep under the olive tree on the shores of Scheria, and the Phaeacians leave him sleeping on the shore of Ithaca. When he wakes, the dream world is finally behind him. He is ready to return to reality. The differences between Odysseus's two arrivals are important. When Odysseus struggled ashore at Scheria, he was naked and penniless, having barely escaped death at sea. Arriving in Ithaca, he is clothed and bears the riches that the Phaeacians have given him. He is no longer nobody, stripped of glory. He has begun his ascent. This return to glory is also a return to humanity. When he arrived at Scheria, he stalked out to meet Nausicaa like a mountain lion charging a flock. But as he makes way toward Ithaca, he is, as a man aching for his evening meal when all day long his brace of wine-dark oxen have dragged and bolted plowshare down a fallow field. True to character, Odysseus is clothed not only in Phaeacian garments, but in a fictitious identity. The first person he meets on the misty shore of Ithaca is Athena, and when she tells him he is in Ithaca, he tells an elaborate lie about who he is. I'm a fugitive now, you see. I killed Idomeneus' son. Orsilochus, lightning on his legs, a man who beat all runners alive on that long island. What a racer! He tried to rob me of all the spoil I won at Troy, the plunder I went to hell and back to capture true, cleaving my way through wars of men and waves of sea. Odysseus tells other stories to the swineherd Eumaeus and to Penelope. The reasons for the deception are clear. He has returned to his kingdom and cannot guess at first who will be loyal and who is out to kill him. Unlike the gullible Agamemnon, he is a man of twists and turns and realizes he must distrust everyone. Suspicion and deception come naturally to Odysseus, as Athena observes. Any man, any god who met you would have to be some champion lying cheat to get past you. Yet the lie contains of grains of truth for those with ears to hear. He reveals that he was at Troy, and he will exploit this part of his story throughout the following books. This gives him a basis for saying he knows Odysseus, and that he has news of his imminent return. He also says that he has been to hell and back to recover his plunder, which is quite literally true. Interestingly, he says he is a fugitive seeking asylum, and in Book 15, Telemachus will welcome a real fugitive to the shores of Ithaca, and before meeting the other fugitive, his father. A story is not sufficient cover on Ithaca, however. He needs to have more elaborate clothing to hide his identity. Athena provides us by transforming him into a beggar. I will shrivel the supple skin on your lithe limbs, strip the russet curls from your head, and deck you out in rags you'd hate to see some other mortal wear. I'll dim the fire in your eyes, so shining once, until you seem appalling to all these suitors, even your wife and your son you left behind at home. In this disguise, Odysseus will appear in the palace as a supplicant, seeking hospitality. Thus, the disguise picks up on the constant issue of the treatment of strangers. Moreover, Athena makes him look so lowly that the suitors will treat him with contempt, and this will heighten their guilt and justify the merciless slaughter that Odysseus inflicts on them. In many ways, the story of Odysseus' return to Ithaca reflects themes of the gospel story. The king comes in disguise to his own kingdom to reclaim his throne and is mistreated by the nobles of the kingdom. He suffers their mockery and persecution silently, but then reveals himself in power and glory in a day of resurrection. Even Odysseus' vengeance against the suitors who have been preying on his bride find a parallel in Jesus' coming to Jerusalem to destroy the harlot that drinks the blood of his bride. Still, the two stories diverge subtly. In the Gospels, Jesus submits not only to mockery and rejection, but even to death, and in his death he achieves his victory. Odysseus, operating by the Greek heroic ethic, suffers silently for a time, but only until he has an opening to take savage vengeance against his persecutors. True, Jesus eventually carries out vengeance against his enemies, but on the cross he prays for their forgiveness. Forgive them, for they know not what they do, is not part of Odysseus' vocabulary. The cross is not a weapon in his arsenal. For Odysseus, then, the movement of the last half of the epic is a progress from beggar to king, from humiliation to exaltation. This is not only a personal ascent for Odysseus, but affects a reordering of Ithacan society. In a properly ordered society, the king is at the top, and the beggars, though they are to be treated with kindness, are at the bottom. In Ithaca, beggars, suitors have the run of the palace, while the true king is treated like a beggar. When Odysseus moves from beggar to king, he is also turning the topsy-turvy world of Ithaca right side up. Swine rule Ithaca, Odysseus comes as a beastmaster, and Adam, who establishes human dominion. Following Athena's instructions, Odysseus first makes his way to the hut of the swineherd Eumaeus. The fact that a swineherd appears in the epic at all shows how far we are from the Iliad, where nearly every character is an aristocrat and a warrior. And Homer takes the time to make Eumaeus a real and thoroughly sympathetic character. His loyalty to Odysseus is shown in the care he has taken to protect and care for the swine. His first words are of his long-lost master. Here I sit, my heart aching, broken for him, my master, my great king, fattening up his own hogs for other men to eat, while he, starving for food, I wager, wanders the earth, a beggar adrift in strangers' cities, foreign-speaking lands, If he's still alive, that is, still sees the rising sun. His words are oddly both true and false. His master is a beggar in a land where strangers have been feasting on his wealth, even though he is king and at home. In an epic where treatment of strangers is a test of good and bad character, Eumaeus shows himself to be a good man by inviting Odysseus to eat your fill of bread and wine. His offer is rooted in his piety. When he slaughters a pig for Odysseus to share, he did not forget the gods, but plucked some tufts from the pig's head to place in the fire as a token offering, along with a prayer for Odysseus's return. At the end of Book 14, Eumaeus passes a further test of loyalty. The beggar tells a story about how Odysseus once provided him with a cloak to sleep in, implying that Eumaeus should imitate his master's generosity. Eumaeus immediately answers, "You won't want for clothes or whatever else is due a worn-out traveler." Eumaeus will do his part in reclothing the king who had been stripped naked. He is no Cyclops from his modest possessions. He offers a guest gift. Eumaeus' behavior not only reveals something about this loyal servant, but also provides a commentary on the situation at the palace. On one hand, Odysseus' arrival at the swineherd's hut casts light backward on his previous adventures. While the Phaeacian palace was surrounded by a bronze wall and guarded by golden dogs, the swineherd's hut is surrounded by a wall of his own building and real, vicious guard dogs. Odysseus has come from Never Never Land back into the mundane but familiar world of Ithaca. Yet, though his adventures in Fantasyland are over, one of his most challenging tests awaits him on his own soil. As we have seen, his adventures in No Man's Land have toughened him and taught him the virtue of patience, the necessity of delayed identification. On the other hand, Eumaeus may be contrasted to the suitors. Though the palace may be more richly endowed and the suitors more noble of birth, the swineherd is more civilized, and his hut more welcoming. Finally, the swineherd's reception assures Odysseus that at least some Ithacans have not forgotten him and have kept their lamps lit in anticipation of the bridegroom's return. The master has returned and finds them so doing. Homer has gotten his hero back home, and this winds up the travel phase of Odysseus' story, covering books 5 through 14. Books 1 through 4 show us the education of Telemachus in the ways of heroic society, raising up the son to be a suitable companion to his famous father. But Book 4 ended with the son's fate still hanging in the balance. The suitors boarded now and sailed the sea lanes, plotting in their hearts Telemachus' plunge to death. Before Homer could move forward to the climax of the story, he had to bring Telemachus back into the picture. The parallel between father and son is underscored by the structure of Book 15, which begins with Telemachus' departure from Sparta, switches to the swineherd's hut where Odysseus and Eumaeus trade stories late into the night, and then ends by switching back to Telemachus' arrival at Ithaca. Like father, like son, Telemachus must go, if not to hell and back, at least from a deadly threat to assured life. All the way home from Sparta and Pylos, he wonders, would he sweep clear of death or be cut down? Telemachus must be able to overcome another obstacle as well. Like his father on Calypso's island and on Scheria, Telemachus must resist the temptation to bask in the comforts of Sparta and Pylos while he is needed at home. When he accompanies Pisistratus back to Pylos, he shows he has learned this lesson. He refuses to go all the way to Nestor's house because he fears that Nestor, like a well-meaning lotus eater, will smother him with hospitality. Your father's old, he tells Pisistratus. In love with his hospitality, I fear he'll hold me, chafing in his palace. I must hurry home. Both father and son must leave No Man's Land behind to return to the field of battle and glory. Telemachus, like Odysseus, has been instructed to go to Eumaeus' hut, and the swineherd embraces him as a father brimming with love and welcomes home his darling only son in a warm embrace. Home now in the 10th year from far abroad. This is an example of a reverse simile, a comparison that describes a scene in terms that are directly opposite of what is actually taking place. Telemachus has not been away 10 years, and Eumaeus is not his father. Yet their reunion is compared to the return of a long-lost son. In this case, the simile prepares a way for what happens next. When the swineherd leaves to take a message to Penelope, Odysseus reveals himself to Telemachus, the long-lost father, not the son, has returned. And Telemachus does not immediately welcome his father with a warm embrace. "No, you're not Odysseus, not my father." It is only after Odysseus explains that Athena's power has transformed him to an old beggar that Telemachus, reacting as Penelope later will, threw his arms around his great father, sobbing uncontrollably as a deep desire for tears welled up in both. The first revelation of the king is complete. As in the hall of the Phaeacian, so here in the hut of the swineherd. Tears mark the son of pain. Emmaus may sleep with pigs, but the real swine are in the palace. By contrast with the tears and embraces of the swineherd's hut, Odysseus' reception at his house is not unlike his reception by Polyphemus. In both cases, he takes on the guise of a nobody, an aotis, though this is just one trick from the master of Metis. As with the Cyclops, too, the suitors show no hospitality. The goatherd Melanthius meets Odysseus and Emmaus on the way to the palace with harsh words. "Wretched pig boy, where do you take your filthy swine, the sickening beggar who licks the pots at feasts?" Twice suitors throw stools at Odysseus. Even Melantho, one of the serving women, treats him with contempt. "Get out, you tramp, be glad of the good you've got, or we'll sling a torch at you, rout you out at once." Antinous, the leader of the suitors, lashes out at Emmaus. "Your Highness, swineherd, why drag this to town? Haven't we got our share of vagabonds to deal with, disgusting beggars who lick the feasters' plates?" Though he seems to be referring to the real beggars who come to Ithaca for food. Antinous' questions are rich with unintended irony. The palace is indeed full of beggars who lick feasters' plates. The suitors themselves who are begging food from Odysseus' house. When Antinous says he wants to get rid of the beggar, he is pronouncing his own doom. The connection between the suitors and beggars helps us to understand the boxing match that Odysseus engages in with Arneus, a real beggar, who tries to protect his turf against Odysseus. Odysseus beats him easily and throws him out the door with the words, "No more lording it over strangers, no more playing the beggar king for you." The suitors find enormous comedy in the battle of the beggars, but they are laughing to their own hurt. Only a short time before, Odysseus told Antinous that he looked like a king. Like all the suitors, he is lording it over strangers and playing the beggar king, and his fate will be much worse than that of Arneus. Homer's description of Arneus' wound reminds us of the deaths in the Iliad. Suddenly red blood came spurting out of his mouth, and headlong down he pitched in the dust, howling, teeth locked in a grin, feet beating the ground.